Thank you, and you can be seated if you will. Hey, before you guys get away, Barry, just stand there for a minute. Cynthia, come on up here a minute, honey. I know, you can get over it later, okay? Come on, Cynthia. This is Barry's wife, Cynthia. For those of you who are new to our church, we have been looking for a new worship pastor for about 6 months. And during that interim process, we asked an old friend of mine, Barry Blaze, to come and lead us in worship while we were looking for our permanent worship leader. And Barry has been leading us to do that, and that's his wife, Cynthia. And today, our new worship pastor, they got into town. His family got into town late last night. So he starts to work in the morning, and he'll be leading worship next Sunday morning. So today's Barry's last Sunday. Yeah, y'all can clap for about that. That's exciting. So today's Barry's last day to be our interim worship leader. Although they're going to take like a 3-weekend little vacation there on the weekends. And then they're sticking around with us and going to be a part of our church family. So a couple of weeks ago, we gave him something to remember his ministry hereby, but we also gave you an opportunity to express tangibly your love and appreciation to him. And so the worship ministry team won't stand up here with him while we did this, but we have a check for you and your family, a love offering check of $1,500, and we wanted to give to you guys. Bless you, man. Bless y'all. We appreciate you, buddy. Thank you. God bless you, man. Amen. Okay, all of y'all can leave unless y'all going to help me preach. I told Barry we were sitting in the back in our green room, and I told him before we came out, I said, because I said this in the first service, but I said, Barry, I said it up front, but I mean this. I want to look you in the eyes and tell you you've done a great job. It still blows my mind that a guy that had a motorcycle accident and almost died and is 100% deaf in one ear and 90% deaf in another ear can stand up here and sing and lead people in worship. Just amazes me that he can do that. It really does. I have full hearing and can't sing a lick. So I don't know how that works. I figure if I could make all of y'all deaf, maybe I could lead in singing. That might work out that way, okay? All right, so we gave Barry a check this morning, so why don't I just give everybody a check today? That'd be a good deal, give everybody a check. Well, I'm going to give you a pretend check. And yours is going to be big. I'm going to give you $10,000. How about that? Everybody in the room. And we're going to go back in time, because I want to play this little game. It's my investment game. Let's say I came to you years ago and I said, here's $10,000. You get to go and invest it any way you would like. Where would you invest it? This is one of my favorite new TV commercials. Have y'all seen that one? There's this executive sitting behind the desk, and this guy comes in. He's got his 2 assistants behind him, and this guy comes in wanting some money to invest because he wants to start a whole television channel dedicated to nothing but music. And the guy's laughing. You go, that's crazy. A whole channel dedicated to music will never work. And then he goes, while we're doing it, why don't we just start a whole channel dedicated to weather? People can sit around and watch weather. And then my favorite one is we'll start a food channel, and everybody can just sit around. And it still blows my mind that there's a whole channel on television dedicated to just watching people cook. I mean, I don't get it. My wife watches some of those shows on the cooking deal. I think she's praying that I'll learn how. And I tell her, honey, ain't going to happen. So, but we'll keep watching them. If somebody had come to me years ago and asked me to invest in a food channel or a weather channel or a news channel or something like that, I would have said it wouldn't work. I wouldn't have invested. Now, I might have gave them some money for the sports channel. I might have done that. But can you imagine? So if I gave you $10,000 years ago and told you, let's go invest your money, where'd you invest it? See, the neat thing is you can now look back The deal is figuring out now where to invest their money, for the future. So I did a little research. Brian is one of our financial advisors. You'll be proud of my research here, buddy. All right. So if you had taken $10,000 in 1970 and invested in Procter and Gamble, that $10,000 would be worth $363,000 today. That's not a bad return on investment, is it? Plus, every year, you get a dividend check of over $12,000 every year. If you'd have taken that $10,000 and invested in Coca-Cola in 1990, okay? If you'd done that, that $10,000 would now be worth $73,143. And every year you'd get a dividend check of $1,968. It's not a bad deal. Here's my favorite. Now, every woman in here will go, If you had taken $10,000 in 1980 and invested in Walmart, that's my designer store there, Walmart. That $10,000 today would be worth $3.9 million. Wow. I knew I should have put that quarter I had in Walmart. And every year you get a dividend check of $108,729. Not bad. I'd be playing a lot more golf if I'd have done that. If you had invested $10,000 in the initial stock offering of Microsoft, that today would be worth $3.6 million, and every year they'd give you a dividend check of over $87,000. And you see, the thing about investing is figuring out where to invest. There's some people, that's what they do for a living. They give you advice on where to invest your money. Now let me just say, if you come today to hear me give you advice on where to invest your money, I can't help you other than to say, I know I will keep Krispy Kreme in business from now on. That's the only advice I can give you, okay? But I can't do that. But it is amazing to me, people don't know where to invest their life. It's not just where do you invest your money, but where do you invest your life and who you are and what you have. I started 3 weeks ago a series of lessons entitled Stories from the Greatest Storyteller. And Jesus is the greatest storyteller to ever live. Here's what Jesus would do. If he wanted to teach you some life lesson or some principle, he'd tell a story. And when he'd tell that story, at the end, he'd come home with a point and make his point. Now, technically, we have come to call those stories parables. Today, I want to look at one of his stories. It has technically been called the parable of the talents. It's a parable about sacks of money. And I want to read that to you. Now, open up your bulletin. If you're new today, get the bulletin they gave you when you came in the door. Don't just sit there and look at me. Get your bulletin. Open it up. Inside it, there's some study notes. I want you to take the study notes out. There ought to be a pen around you somewhere. Get a pen, because I want you to take notes. I'm going to give you 7 things today I want you to write down before you leave. So whether this is your first time here or a millionth time here, I want you to write down these 7 things on the study notes inside your bulletin. I didn't put all of the story in your notes because it takes up all space, but it's going to be up on the screen. The story Jesus tells is recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, the 25th chapter, verses 14 through 30. So let me just read it. If you can imagine, you're standing out by this dirt road, and somebody asks a question, Jesus says, I got a story for you. So listen to Jesus tell his story. He says, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. He then left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest. See, that's why I told those investing stories. He began to invest the money, and he earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, the master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they'd used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 5 more. The master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I'll give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I've earned 2 more. The master said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I'll give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. Then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, now listen to what he says. Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back. But the master replied, look what Jesus said, or the master says, you wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it. Then he ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use, now we're going to get to the point. We're going to get to the point of the story. To those who use well what they're given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now, throw this useless servant into outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's a neat little story, but it's a story with a lot of points. And here's what I want to do today. I want to give you 7 principles on how to invest your life. This is not financial investment planning, but it is spiritual investment planning, if you will. So this is called the parable of the talents, but Jack today is going to name it 7 principles for how to invest your life. And I want you to write this down. It's important you learn these 7. Now, does everybody understand? This is not good ideas from Jack. This is from God. By the way, there are 3 things you can do with your life, if you've wondered. There's 3 things you can do with your life. The first thing you can do is waste your life. I see that every day. I see students growing up with a lot of talent, with a lot of ability, a lot of opportunities to do things in life, and they waste it. They squander it. They're too busy playing and partying, and they never get around to what's important in life, and they never achieve anything. They just waste their life. Some of you, that's where you are right now. You're just wasting your life. Second thing you can do with your life is you can just spend it. You can just get up every day and work and burn it up. You know, that's what a lot of us are doing. Every day we get up, we go to work, we come home from work, we eat, we watch a little television, we go to bed. We spent that day. And we'll spend 5 days and say, thank God it's Friday and we got the weekend to play. That you can waste your life, you can spend your life. There's a third thing you can do with your life. You can invest your life. And what Jesus taught is the smartest thing to do with your life is to invest it in something that'll still be here when you're gone. To invest your time, your talents, your energy, your finances. Now, by the way, I don't want anybody to get nervous. I know this is a story on money, but this is not a sermon on money. We're not even talking about money. We're talking about your life. How to invest your life in something that'll be here after you're gone. So if you're ready, I want to start. Let's go with these 7 principles of how to invest your life. Principle number 1. Are you ready? Write it down. I call it the principle of ownership. That's one of the things you learn in this story, that everything I have belongs to God. Let me go back to that story and read you what it says. In verse number 14, Jesus said, he called together his servants. Now read the next 4 words with me, okay? And let me hear you read it out loud. Can I hear you? Okay, let's go. And entrusted his money to them when he was gone. Whose money? His money, okay? I know some financial planners. I know some investment counselors. And here's one of the things they know. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their client because they know this is not my money. It's their money, and I'm advising or I'm managing it or I'm helping them to manage it. In this story, Jesus said, there's this boss man that was going on a trip, and he gave his money to these guys and said, now I want you to invest it. He didn't give them that money so they could have a big party while he was gone. He didn't give them this money so they could build a big house or buy a boat or get a new car or redecorate the house. This was his money that they were to manage. So guys, I want us to learn this principle. It's a very important principle. Everything I have belongs to God. I want you to say that out loud with me. I want everybody to come on, exercise your vocal cords and get ready to say, everything I have belongs to God. Let's say it together. Ready? Everything I have belongs to God. Now you just said it, but do you believe it? You said, well, Jack, I worked hard for my money. I really did. Well, who gave you the ability to work? Well, I used my mind to make my money. Who gave you your mind? Well, I used my talents to. Who gave you that talent? Look, you're one stroke away from not being able to earn any income at all. Everything we have belongs to God. The truth is, I don't own anything. Now, if you don't believe that, just think about this. I don't own it because when I die, I don't get to take it with me. See, I'm just borrowing it while I'm here. So I may have it 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, but then it's gone. I was reading in the paper the other day about this billionaire that died, and one of the reporters said, I wonder how much he left behind. And I went, he left it all. I've done a lot of funerals in my life. I have never done a funeral where they had a hearse with a U-Haul on the back of it. I mean, you don't get to take it with you, okay? I was in Egypt one time, and I went into the big pyramids where they'd buried those rich. And this one guy, King Tut, he's so rich. And they said, well, this is one of our poor ones. He died when he was young. He didn't have time to amass a lot of money. And I looked at all this gold and all this stuff that he had, and he thought he was taking it with me. Look, he was gone. His bones had turned into dust, and the stuff, was still there. You don't get to take it because we don't own anything. Do you get this principle? This is one of the things Jesus was telling that story. You don't own anything. Your house, it's not yours. Your car, it's not yours. Your money, your CDs, your retirement, it's not yours. Everything I have belongs to God. That's principle number one. All right? Let's look at principle number two. Would you do that? I call it the principle of allocation. God allocates his resources out. And God gives everybody some talents. Here's what it says in the story. In verse 15, the New International Version, it says like this. To one he gave 5 talents of money. Now, the word talent, way back in the Bible days, just meant a sum of money. About the time this was written, a talent was worth about $1,000. So 5 talents of money would be about $5,000. Then $2,000, about $1,000. But the point is, Jesus gave to each guy a certain amount of money. Did you notice this? He didn't give everybody the same. He didn't give everybody the same because everybody's not the same. He said he gave it to them according to their ability. Now, across this room right now, there are people who have different levels of resources, talent, skills. We're not all the same. But everybody in this room has talents, don't you? We all have talents. Some of us are good at one thing. Some of us are good at another thing. My talent is running my mouth. I get to do that. We got family, got friends visiting from Boston, and they've just been sitting around all weekend just laughing. And I've told them, y'all need to stay here a week or two long because if you get to heaven, this is how they're going to talk when you get up there, okay? And somebody told me this week that God told them something. I said, well, look, if God told you, tell me, does he have a southern accent? I've been wanting to prove this for a long time. All right? So anyway, everybody's got different talents. We all don't have the same talents. Now, at my house, my garage has gotten pretty bad. I mean, you got a 3-car garage and you can't park a car in the garage. It's pretty bad. So we decided that we were going to build some storage shelves and get everything organized. And so I walked out there and I looked at that, and the first thing I thought is, I need help. So I called my brother-in-law, who can do that kind of thing. He's skilled. He's got talents in doing that. He's real good at it. So I said, on the weekends, bro, I know what you can do. We have a brother-in-law deal here. So he comes over my house, and for last Saturday and then yesterday, we're out in the garage and we're building these shelves. He's measuring and cutting, and we're doing all that and got through. It's great. Everything's organized. You can see the floor. You can park the car. It's great. We got through. I looked at him and I said, you know, I am so glad that you got the opportunity to work with me, because it is not very often you're going to get to work with a master skilled craftsman like me. And I'm sure this has educated you and helped you a great deal being able to work with me. And I was glad you got to apprentice under me, okay? Well, we both knew that was a joke. He's got those skills. Now, different people in this room have different skills. We have an acrostic at our church that we use. We teach it in 301. We say everybody's got their own shape. And we're not talking about your physical shape. We're talking about how God made you. I'll do this real quick. You can get this in detail when you go to our class called Ministry 301. But the S, you have everybody here who is a committed follower of Jesus Christ has what the Bible calls a spiritual gift. What that means is God has given you a spiritual ability to do some kind of ministry. That's in the Bible. When you become a Christian, God gives you a spiritual ability to do ministry. Now, everybody in here's got one of those or two of those, okay? Then you have a heart to do certain things, or a passion to do certain things. I mean, some people like to organize. Some people like to plan. Some people like to execute. Some people like to achieve. Some people love to work with children. Some people love to work with senior citizens. Some people, you have different hearts and passions. So if you look at what your gifts are and what your passion or heart is, and then you have certain abilities. Maybe you're a craftsman, or maybe you're a speaker, or a singer, or a player, or a teacher, or you have the ability to work with children or to administrate. You look at whatever your abilities and talents are. And then we have all these personality types. We got the high I's, the high D's, we got the introverts, we got the extroverts, we got the normals, we got the weirdos. We got all kind of personalities, right? I mean, really, in this room, I'm looking, and I know a lot of y'all. We got all kind of personalities in this room. And some of y'all going, yeah, and we're looking to the fruitcake right now. But anyway, you got all kind of personalities. Well, you take your personality, and then you've got all the experiences that you've been through in life. They help make you who you are. Here's my point. If you look at the combination of these things, that's you. Really, that's you. That's why you're different than anybody else. See, I could have the gift of teaching, and you could have the gift of teaching, but it'd be totally different, because you have a heart for children, say I have a heart for adults. Or you have the ability, see, your ability, your passion, your personality, it all shapes who you are. Now here's my point. Jesus says in this story, I gave to each guy what I wanted him to have. God has shaped you the way you are on purpose. God has given you these things to use in your life. And the great principle that Jesus taught is you're to invest all of that somewhere. That leads me to the third principle. I call it the principle of accountability. God expects me to use what he gave me. Do you understand that? Let's go back to our story, verse number 19. It says, after a long time, their master returned. Take your pen. Underline these three words. Their master returned. See, what he's saying here is, I'm going to come back one of these days too. Okay? After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they'd used his money. I want you to circle the word account. Everybody has to give an account of what we've done with what we've received. Okay? Now, write down what you need to write down, then look up here, okay? I want you to get this part. I don't want you to miss this part. Are you listening? Do you head this way right here? If I know you're there, okay? You're there. Listen. What God has given you, one day, he's going to do an audit of your life, and you are going to have to give an account of what you've done with what he's given you. That's one of the points of this story that he tells. He wants a return on his investment. He said, I didn't just give you this so you could go build you a nice house, have a nice car, go to the beach, get you a boat, play some golf, buy some new dresses. What did you do with what I gave you? All right? And now, here's the principle you need to grab hold of and get this. The more you get, the more you're responsible for. Hello? You can fill the blanks in like this. The greater the privilege, the greater the responsibility. You know, look at the play on words. You know, we use words and never think about what they mean. Think about this. The more responsibilities that you have, the more you are responsible for and are accountable for. Now, just so you know, I'm not making this up. Let me read to you what Jesus said. Jesus said in Luke chapter 12, verse 48, but someone who does not know and then does something wrong will be punished only lightly. When someone has been given much, much will be required in return. And when somebody has been entrusted with much, even more will be required. So listen to me. The more God has given you, the more you are accountable for. If you're smart, you're accountable for that. If you're wealthy, you're accountable for that. If you're talented, you're accountable for that. If you have certain assets, you're accountable for that. Everything you have, you're accountable for, and the more you have, the more you're accountable. Do you get that principle? That's right here in this story. It's very simple. I call it the principle of accountability. Then number 4, there's the principle of utilization. It's wrong to bury what God gave you. Now, 2 of these guys went out and they invested and they got a return. One of the guys went and dug a hole in the ground and buried it. And when he got back, he walks up to Jesus and said, I still got it. I still got it. Here it is. Here's your money back. Here it is. And he thought Jesus was going to be happy. He thought the master would be thrilled that he hadn't lost what he'd been given. But Jesus didn't want him to safeguard it. Jesus wanted him to invest it. But it says in verse 18, he dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. You know what he did? Now listen. You know what he did? Some of you are sitting there going, Jack, he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't go out and spend it on a party. He didn't go out and spend it on booze and women and drugs and all that kind of stuff. He gave it back. Here's what he did wrong. Are you listening? Don't miss this part because you got to get to. Here's what he did wrong. He did nothing. That's what he did wrong. He did nothing. I don't know how y'all grew up. I grew up in a religious environment that said sin is all these bad things people do. You know, we had a little saying, you can't smoke, drink, dance, or chew, or run around with women that do. That was our little saying, you know. And that was a sin. That was it. If you did those things, that was a sin. And see, I'm learning. I'm confession right here. I'm gonna confess. I went and played golf with a couple of guys in our church Thursday. And so I was there, and I was their guest. And we started playing. They said, we're going to play a quarter a hole. And I went, let's make sure it's not a quarter of $100 or a quarter of $1,000. We're talking 25 cents. And they said, yeah. So I'm sitting there and said, okay, well, God will forgive me. So we played a quarter hole. I thought I was going to have to go to the bank and borrow money to pay up when we got through. I mean, it cost me $3. So I figured that was God punishing me for gambling with the sinners in this church. But anyway, and I asked God to forgive me. I did. I really did. But I learned my lesson. I didn't invest that money pretty good. But we grew up thinking that sin is if you do one of those bad things. Okay? And that might be true. But guys, it's also sin if you do nothing. I call it the sin of inactivity or the sin of passivity. There's all the good things we should have been doing that we've not done. We have omitted doing things that we should have done. We just sat on what we got. And we've not invested our life. We've not used our life. Do you know how much faith it takes to play it safe? None. I got an instant verse for you. The Bible says in Hebrews 11:6, look at this. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. You can't please God unless you have faith. And it takes no faith to play it safe. See, if you just want to live a safe life and never try anything, never step out on the edge and do something great for God, you don't need faith. Now look, I've not done everything in life I've wanted to do. I've not been successful at everything in life I've tried. But I'm going to tell you something. When I die, y'all can at least put this on my tombstone, okay? I mean, you can put this. You can't put he did everything he wanted to do. But you can put on my tombstone, Jack Millwood, he tried real hard. I mean, you can put that on there. You can say, he tried real hard. And some of us are afraid to do that. For example, I've been praying. I've been asking God about what he wants to do here. And God just really laid it on my heart. Easter is going to be Sunday, March the 31st, the last Sunday. It's early this year. It's the last Sunday of March. So I've asked the Lord to let us have 1,000 people in worship on Easter Sunday. Now, if you've been around this church the last 4 or 5 months ago, if somebody had said we might have 1,000 people by Easter, we would have looked at you and said, you've lost your marbles, you're crazy, it's physically impossible, it can't happen. But you know what? I've asked the Lord to let it happen. And in my heart, I believe it's going to happen. And you know what? I'm just going to step out there and say, let's go. I mean, what are you going to do? It takes faith to please God. Now, we had just under 500 last week, so that means we got to double what we had. So we just trust God and ask God to do that. Some of us, there was a time in our life we trusted God. There was a time in our life we were bold. There was a time in our life we did things. But some of you have become what I call, I got a name. Some of you have become what I call an Alka-Seltzer Christian. You fizzled out on God. There was a time you had energy and fire and zeal and zest, and you served God, but you got tired, didn't you? You got tired. You got worn out. You got busy. And so you just sort of fizzled out on God. Look, God owns everything. He's allocated some of it to you. He wants you to use it, and we got to be accountable for how we're going to use it. Here's principle number 5. I call it the principle of motivation. And in this story, Jesus tells us something. If you pay attention to the story, he tells you that fear will keep you from using your talents and developing your talents. Matter of fact, he gives 3 fears in this story that keep us. First, there's self-doubt. You know what I mean by that? Some of you say, well, I'd love to do this. I'd love to do that, but I could never do that. I could never get up there and sing. I could never play. I could never work with children. I could never work with the teenagers. I see some of you right now that are doing things when I remember you said, I could never do them. Okay? You know what I'm talking about? I'm just winking at Lee because she's up here, that pretty lady that sings up here with the pretty voice. I remember well when she said, I can sing, but I can't talk. I can't talk. Now I go sometimes, please shut up. No, I don't really. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. You know I'm kidding. You know I'm kidding. But we have self-doubt. I could never do that. Do y'all remember when you were in elementary school? And I know for some of you that's remembering a long time ago. But when you're in elementary school and the teacher asked a question and in your heart you knew the answer. You knew the answer to the question. She said, everybody knows the answer. Raise your hand. And you wanted to raise your hand, but you weren't 100% sure your answer was right. So you didn't raise your hand because you didn't want to have to say it and be wrong in front of everybody. So that self-doubt kept you from raising a hand because you didn't want to put your reputation on the line. There are a lot of you, there's things you'd love to do in life. There's things you'd love to do for God, but that self-doubt keeps nagging away from you. So you know what you do? You dig a hole in the ground and put it in there and play it safe. Instead of investing it and trying it and using your life. That fear of failure, that self-doubt eats you up. And then there's what I call, well, see, here's what he said. I was afraid I'd lose your money, so I hit it in earth. And then there's the fear of self-pity. You know what this is? I failed so many times. I've failed so many times. I'm looking around this room right now. There are people in this room. You're not serving God. You're not doing anything for God because you say, well, I've messed up too many times in my life. You don't know what I've done. I could never serve God because I did this or I did that. Jack, you don't know how bad I've been. I was thinking about that this week, and there's 2 guys I want to tell you about. Okay, listen, this is good. This is good. Listen to this. 2 guys in the Bible. Even if you don't read the Bible much, you probably know these 2 guys' names. One of them's name is Judas, and one of them's name is Peter. Remember those 2 names? Let me tell you what Judas and Peter had in common. both of them denied that they knew Jesus. Now that's a pretty big failure, wouldn't you say? Peter was a traitor and turned Jesus in, and that's how he got arrested. And then when he got arrested, Peter stood in the back, and when confronted, Peter said, I don't know who he is, I don't know who he is, and he chickened out. But now watch this. So both guys were complete failures. Can't do worse than deny Jesus in his moment of need. Both guys are complete failures. But look what happened. Judas turned inward, got filled with self-pity, got depressed, and went out and hung himself and killed himself. Peter, on the other hand, turned around and said, Jesus, I blew it. I did so bad. When you needed me, I wasn't there. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. And Jesus looked at him and said, I forgive you. Now let's go back to using what God's given you. Now watch this. This is so cool. Peter denied Jesus at the crucifixion. 50 days later, at a celebration called Pentecost, which means 50. 50 days later, Peter walked out into the middle of the streets of Jerusalem on a holiday and preached a sermon, and 3,000 people gave their life to Jesus Christ. Look at this. From the moment of his greatest failure to the moment of his greatest success was only a 50-day period. Now I want to tell you something. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how bad you've been. You can take that guilt and turn it inward and say, oh, I can never do anything. I'll be a Christian, but I'll have to sit on the back seat. I'll have to sit in the balcony. I'm a second-class Christian. Or you can do like Peter and say, God will take my failures and weaknesses, blend them in with the rest of my life, and use me in a great way. One of the things that keeps us from serving God is self-doubt, self-pity, and here's the third fear that I wanted to throw out at you and let you think about. I call it self-consciousness. But before I do that, let me just say these two things. Guys, it's not a matter of where you've been, it's a matter of where you're headed. That's what matters. It's not what you've done, it's where you're going and what you're going to do. Let me ask you this question. Will the rest of your life turn out to be the best of your life? That's the key. Now, here's the third fear. It's self-consciousness. We ask ourselves, well, what do people think if I do that? Now, I want you to see something in this story. This is an interesting part of this story. Are y'all with me? Have I lost you? Are you still there? If you took a nap, wake up, okay? So the master comes back. Two guys come in. Here's the money. Here's the money. Here comes number 3. I got the bag, one bag, did nothing with it. What does he say? What's his excuse? Here's his excuse. Listen to this. Well, first, before I get the excuse, Proverbs 29:25 says, fear of a man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. We can't be afraid of what people will say. But look at what this guy says. He comes to Jesus and he says, Master, I knew you were a harsh man. What this? You're not going to believe this. He's going to blame the master. He's going to say it's the master's fault that he didn't get any money for his one bag. Because look what he says. I knew you were tough. Harvesting crops you didn't plant. You had people working for you, doing it for you. I was afraid, there it is. I was afraid I'd lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. So the reason I didn't invest it and get anything done with it is I was scared of what you'd do if I lost it. So I just buried it and hid it. Now here's what I've learned. When we do nothing, it causes us to begin to make excuses for our inactivity. I guarantee you all across this room this morning, we'd all stand up and give all the reasons why we don't come to church, why we don't read our Bible, why we don't tithe, why we don't let the Bible live out in our personal life. We all got excuses for doing nothing. And sometimes we'll even blame God. We'll say, well, God didn't give me the talent. Well, God didn't give me this. Well, God didn't give me that. We live in a victim society. We're all a victim. It's my parents' fault. It's my wife's fault. It's my husband's fault. It's my bad job. It's my bad boss. It's everybody else's fault. All right, here's the 6th principle. It's the principle of application. Now, this is important, so don't miss it. If I don't use it, I lose it. If I don't use it, I lose it. Now that's true about anything in life. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. It's true about money, energy, talents, abilities. Let me see if I can illustrate it like this. We've got one guy in our church who had a hip replacement about a month and a half, 2 months ago. We got another guy in our church who's going to have a knee replacement this week. And I was talking to both of them, and here's what they said. They said when they changed my hip, when they changed my knee, they told me the first thing I need to do in the hospital, laying on the bed, is I need to start using that muscle. Because I've had this surgery. And if I don't use it, it'll get weak, and it'll make my rehabilitation 3 times harder and 2 times longer. I've got to use it. And here's what they said. If I don't use my muscle, I lose my muscle. All right? So the same principle is true in life. If you don't use what God has given you, you can lose it. Now, here's something I want you to remember what Jesus did? Jesus, he had given him that one bag and he buried it. Jesus took it away from him and gave it to the other guy. Here's the principle. God has the right to take away anything I don't use for him. God may come to you and say, I gave you this opportunity. If you're not going to use it, I'll give the opportunity to somebody that will use it. And the reverse of that is true, guys. If I want to see God do something in my life in a certain area, then I need to start letting him do it. And I need to go in that direction. Do you remember there's a principle in the Bible called sowing and reaping? That if I sow a certain seed, that I will reap a certain crop. Do y'all get that? Do you head this way? Do you get it? Okay, let's get real complicated here, okay? This is deep. This is deep. Stay with me. If I want to plant, dig a hole in the ground and put a seed in the ground, and I want a tree to grow up that gives me apples, what kind of seed do I need to plant? This is deep stuff, ain't it? That's why you come to Crossword. If you plant an orange seed, you think you're going to get any apples? The answer is no. You do like this right here. It won't work. I've tried. It won't work. Okay? You reap what you sow. Now, I want to tell you, I want everybody to get this. Whatever you want God to do in your life, that's what you need to be sowing. So, this sermon's been done. I've had it early this morning. I'm reading it. I'm praying about it. And I'm thinking, all right, let's put this to Jack. What does Jack want right now in my life? Well, here's one of the things I'm praying for. I'm praying that God will take the people in my life and help them be more patient, more understanding, more gentle, and kinder. I'm praying for God to do that in my life. So, here's what happened. During the week, I'm talking to somebody, and they didn't know they were helping me with my sermon. But here's what they said. There was somebody we were talking about, and they made this statement. That person wants people to love them, but they won't love other people. So they're just getting back what they gave. And they said, if they want people to be more loving toward them, they got to be more loving toward people. Now that's exactly what I'm talking about. So if I'm saying, if I want people to be more gentle and kinder and sweeter and more tender, then what I need to do? Sit back and fuss and pitch a fit and pout when people don't treat me the way I want them to? Or do I need to start treating people kinder, more gentle, more patient, and more understanding? So that as I treat them that way, it comes back to me. See, you know it's true. If I'm angry towards you, what am I going to get back from you most of the time? Anger right back. So see, this is what Jesus is saying. I need to use what God has given me, and if I want it, then I've got to sow what I want to reap. And if I'm sowing impatience and anger, then that's what I'm going to get back from the people in my life. But if I want patience and understanding and kindness, then I got to give it out, even when I don't want to give it out. Okay? So whatever you need, by the way, this is true for anything. Whatever you need in your life, you need to start giving it. By the way, that's true about money. See, what did the Bible say? Give, and it shall be given to you. So if I want God to bless me financially, I need to give to the Lord and let him give back to me so that I can give back to him, so he can give back to me, so I can give back to him and get in on that cycle. All right, here's principle number 7. The principle, I call it the principle of compensation. If I use my talents, I'm going to be rewarded. Now, I love this part of the story. It's a cool part of the story. The guy comes in, had 5 bags. He comes back, he's doubled it, got 5 more bags. And what did Jesus say? Look at verse 21. By the way, he said the same thing to the guy with 2 bags came back. Look what he says. The master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling the small about, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. In that verse right there are 3 rewards that you get when you're faithful to God. The first one is you get affirmation. The master looked at that servant and said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've done a good job. Come on in. Now, I'm not one of those kind of people that I got to be patted on the back all the time. You got to tell me. Now, some Sundays I'll walk out here and somebody will pat me on the back and say, boy, that was a great sermon today. Some Sundays I'll walk out and somebody say, boy, that stunk today. But, I don't have to have that. But there are times when I need affirmation from the right people. For example, last Monday, I went up to Savannah, Georgia, and I was the motivational speaker for all the salespeople for the southeast region of Aflac, sales of Aflac Insurance. I figured being their advertising scheme is a duck, they wanted to bring a quack in to speak. So I went up there Monday, and I was their motivational speaker. So I spoke, but there's one difference. Out in that audience when I was speaking with all those salespeople out there was one out there in that audience that I was particularly interested in, and that was my little girl. She's not a little girl, she's a grown woman. She's 25 years old, about to be 25 years old, and she's one of those, matter of fact, she's a district manager, salesperson for Aflac, and so she was in the audience when I was speaking. And normally when I speak, I just sit down and go on and do my thing. But this has never happened to me, but I did. I finished speaking, and I went and sat down, and I sat down beside my daughter, and just reflexively, I just looked at her and I said, did I do okay? Because I wanted her to think I did good. She looked at me and said, Daddy, you were awesome. You were the best. You were great. I go, yeah, good. That's what I want. So I get in my car because I got to speak here, about 6 o'clock that night. So I drive back, and as I'm walking in to speak Monday night at the church, my phone goes off. It's a text message. Phone goes off. Text from my girl. And she goes, Dad, all day people have been talking about how great you were. You're the best dad in the whole world. I am so proud to be your daughter. I'm going, yeah. And then she signs it. You're still my number 1 man. Oh, man, this is good stuff. That's why they didn't pay me. Because they knew they'd get her to send that text. One of these days, I'm going to stand before God. And more than anything in my life, I want God to look at me and say, you did good, son. With what I gave you, you did a good job. That's the affirmation I want. And that's the reward. Here's another reward. You get more responsibilities. You get a promotion. He says, you did a good job with the little bit I gave you. I'm going to give you some more. See, look, guys, God learns who he can trust. Some of us want to be head honcho. God said, let me see how you do when you're a servant. When I first went to seminary, I had a professor that I really admired. And I went off to school. I was going to be the next Billy Graham, I was going to charge the world. This big ministry. I was talking to Dr. Fish one day, and Dr. Fish says, Jack, listen to this. This is wise. He said, Jack, you worry about the depth of your ministry and let God take care of the width of your ministry. There's wisdom in that. He said, in other words, Jack, you focus on learning who God is and just getting connected to God. And then God will give you whatever sphere of influence he wants you to give. Wisdom in that. And the more God knows he can trust me, the more God will put under my control. And then the third is celebration. Some of you think God is a prune. God loves parties. Next Sunday, I'm going to tell about maybe the most famous story God ever told, Jesus told. Is one about a son that became a prodigal. And when he came home, they had a party. And when these two guys came back with their investment, he said, let's celebrate. Let's have a party. God's your biggest fan. God wants nothing more than to see your life explode with fruitfulness. The reason you have what you have is God loves you and he wants you to blossom. And he says, invest your life in something that really counts. We're going to do a little test. Do you have the study notes in front of you? Now, everybody get them. No exceptions. Everybody get the study notes. And I want you to look at it. On the back, I put what I call a life investment guide. And I want you to look at that guide, okay? On that guide, there's three levels of that guide. One is for your talent, one's for your time, one's for your money. And there's numbers, 10 to 100. Those stand for percent. I want you to look at the line that says, my talent. What percentage of your talent have you made available to God to use? And when you figure that out, I want you to go to that line and I want you to put an X just above the number of what you have made available to God to use. And then I want you to think about 6 months from now, what would you like that number to be? What percent would you like God to have available of your life? And then I want you to go to the next line. What percentage of your time have you made available to God? 6 months from now, what percent of your time would you like to make available for God? Look at the money line. What percent of your money have you said, God, I make this available to you to use ever how you want to? 6 months from now, what would you like that number to be? And put a G on the line for your goal. The point is, we need to think about where we are and where we want to be. And I want you to honestly look at your time, your talents, your resources, and say, how do I invest my life in something that'll be here when I'm gone? I want us all to close our eyes for a minute, would you? Everybody just close your eyes. Don't look around. Just sort of focus on what the Lord's saying to you and just listen for a minute. Some of you say, Jack, truth is, I've not done a good job of investing my life. When it comes to spiritual things, I probably dropped the ball. And I'm probably like this guy who sat on it. And I'm afraid God may just, Then here's what I want you to do. Just sitting right where you are, you can pray and ask Jesus to forgive you and come into your life. You don't have to step up, stand out, do nothing. Just right where you're seated. If you would just simply pray this, say, Jesus, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I ask you to forgive me. And I ask you to come into my heart. I want to give my life to you. And I want you to forgive me for my past. And lead me from this day on. If you just prayed that prayer and meant it from the bottom of your heart, before you leave today, I want you to take that tear-off slip in your bulletin. On the back of it's a place to check and say, I prayed that prayer with Jack to ask Jesus in my heart. If you'll check that, I will send you a personal video that I made that will help you know what to do next in your spiritual life. For the rest of us, I'd like you to just join me in prayer. God, you've been good to us. You've been better to me than I deserve. I know that. You've given me more than I deserve. And God, I pray for everybody in this room that would take whatever you've placed in our lives and would use it for your glory. that we wouldn't be selfish, we wouldn't turn inward, we wouldn't just live for ourselves, but we'd live for you and we'd live for eternity. And every day we'd keep our eye on forever, on eternity. And that we'd use what we have to bring you glory, to be responsible. God, we know that one day we'll stand before you and give an account of the way we lived. And I pray that you would help us to be like those guys who came back and said, Lord, I took what you gave me and I used it for your glory. And we want to hear you say, well done. We love you and we praise you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for coming today. I want to encourage the ladies to be here Saturday. Jennifer is one of the best speakers you'll ever hear. I've known her many years. She's a wonderful girl. You won't be sad you came. God bless you. Have a great Sunday afternoon and enjoy the Super Bowl.